Welcome to the Sleepy Underworld, a place where romance blooms, magic sparkles, and timeless fairy tales are reimagined for the dreamers of today. From heart-stirring romances to spellbinding adventures, every story is a soothing escape into a realm of love, wonder, and charm. So curl up, press play, and let us carry you away to the land of dreams. Don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and leave a comment. We'd love to know in what part of the world you are watching and what is your favorite tip for a good night's sleep. Thank you for watching and enjoy the video. The night ocean breathed in endless whispers, each wave carrying secrets to shore. I stood at my bedroom window, wrapped in the thick summer air, when I first saw the impossible light. It wasn't the familiar silver path of moonlight on the water. This glow pulsed beneath the surface in shades of electric blue and ethereal green, moving with deliberate purpose against the tide. The sight drew me from my bed, my bare feet silent on the weather-worn steps of the beach house. Salt-laden air clung to my skin as I descended to the shore, my cotton nightdress offering little protection against the humid night. The sand felt like warm velvet between my toes, and it still held the day's heat beneath its cooled surface. As I approached the water's edge, the mysterious light intensified. What I'd first taken for bioluminescent algae resolved into distinct points of radiance, each one moving independently like underwater fireflies. They wove intricate patterns beneath the surface, forming a glowing pathway that stretched toward the horizon. The gentle surf kissed my ankles, unexpectedly warm for a night ocean. Each wave carried more of the living lights, their blue-green glow reflecting off my skin until I shimmered. The rational part of my mind, the part that had helped me survive the past year of grief and change, urged caution. But something deeper called to me, an ancient recognition that bypassed thought entirely. I waded deeper, letting the water rise past my knees. My nightdress floated around my thighs, becoming nearly transparent in the otherworldly light. Glowing creatures swirled around me, their touch like pinpricks of electricity against my skin. They seemed to be leading me toward something, or someone. He appeared like a mirage made solid, standing on a sandbar that I knew hadn't existed during my afternoon walks on the beach. The mysterious light circled him in lazy spirals, illuminating features that belonged in a Renaissance painting. Dark hair fell in waves to his shoulders, framing a face of impossible beauty. But it was his eyes that held me motionless. They contained the same phosphorescent glow as the creatures in the water, ancient and knowing and touched with inexpressible sorrow. You see them clearly. His voice carried across the water like distant thunder, deep and resonant. Most mortals perceive only a vague glow, if anything at all. What are they? I continued forward, drawn by a pull I couldn't explain. The water was chest deep now, but the sandbar rose to meet me, solid beneath my feet. The last echoes of what once was. He held out his hand, and several of the lights danced up to spiral around his fingers. My final companions in exile. I'm Kala, I offered, mesmerized by the play of light across his features. Up close, his skin was translucent, like sunlight through sea glass. Adrian. A smile touched his lips, sad but genuine. Though centuries ago, I was called by another name, one your tongue couldn't shape without breaking. The lights pulsed brighter at his words, their glow reflecting off the water droplets in the air until we stood in a sphere of living light. You're not human, I said, the words falling from my lips like stones into still water. No. His smile faded. I am a spirit of these waters, though much diminished from what I once was. Pride and ancient magic bound me to this place, neither fully present nor truly gone. I recognized the ache in his voice. It echoed my own isolation since moving to this small coastal town after my mother's death. My father had retreated into his work, leaving me to navigate my grief alone in a place where every face was a stranger's. How long have you been here? Longer than this shore has held its current shape. Adrian turned and gazed at the horizon, where the full moon hung low and heavy. The curse that binds me is as old as the first tide. These lights, these fragments of my original form, are all that remain of my power. Without conscious thought, I reached out to touch his arm. His skin felt cool and solid, yet somehow fluid. Are you in pain? He looked down at my hand. Physical pain, no, but watching my essence fade with each passing tide. He let the sentence hang unfinished in the salty air. Will you tell me about it? About who you were? The words surprised me even as I spoke them. Adrian studied me for a long moment, his luminous eyes searching my face. You should return to shore, Calla. The tide is rising, and these waters hold dangers you can't imagine. I'm not afraid. The statement came out stronger than I intended, and his expression softened. Perhaps you should be. He stepped back, and the lights swirled around him like a living cloak. But if you wish to hear my story, return tomorrow night. The choice must be yours. I did return, night after night, drawn by something deeper than curiosity. Adrian taught me the language of the tides and showed me how to read the stories written in the movement of waves. His voice painted pictures of crystal cities beneath the sea, of magic that once flowed as freely as water itself, of a time when the boundary between our worlds was as permeable as morning mist. In return, I shared my own story, of the mother who had filled my childhood with art and music before cancer stole her away, of the father who couldn't bear to look at me because I had her eyes, of the loneliness that had followed me from our city apartment to this quiet beach house. Adrian listened with an intensity that made me feel truly seen for the first time since my mother's death. Time moved differently during our midnight meetings. Sometimes we would sit in comfortable silence, watching the bioluminescent creatures dance beneath the surface. Other nights, Adrian would sing in a language that made my heart ache with its beauty, though I couldn't understand the words. The lights would respond to his voice, creating patterns that told stories of their own. I didn't realize I was falling in love until it was too late. It happened gradually, like the tide coming in, each small moment bringing me deeper until I was surrounded. The way his eyes crinkled when he smiled, the gentle power in his voice when he spoke of ancient magic, the careful way he maintained physical distance between us, even as our emotional connection grew stronger. But something was changing. With each passing night, the sandbar seemed smaller, the water deeper. The bioluminescent creatures, once brilliant enough to illuminate the waves for yards around, began to dim. Adrian's form became less substantial, as if he too were fading with his magic. Please, I begged one night, as another full moon witnessed our meeting. Tell me how to help you. There must be a way to break the curse. Pain flickered across his features. There is a way, he admitted, but knowing it will only bring you grief. Tell me anyway. I moved closer, close enough to see the play of light beneath his skin. The curse was designed as both punishment and temptation. His voice dropped to match the whisper of the waves. If I fall in love with a mortal, truly, completely, without reservation, the magic binding me here will shatter. But when it does, this sandbar will collapse, dragging into the depths anyone caught in its destruction. I would return to the sea, but any mortal. He couldn't finish the sentence. The cruel elegance of the curse struck me like a physical blow. It wasn't just meant to bind him. It was designed to ensure that any chance at love would end in tragedy. That's why you've kept your distance. Understanding washed over me with the force of a wave. Why you never... why I never let myself love you as I wanted to. His hand hovered near my cheek, not quite touching. Yes, I would rather fade to nothing than cause your death. But his earlier stories had sparked an idea. You told me humans once crossed between our worlds freely, that the boundary was thinner. In ancient times, yes, but that knowledge has been lost to the ages. Then we'll rediscover it. Determination filled me, pushing back against my despair. You've taught me so much about your world. There must be a way for me to survive in it. Kala... No. I cut him off. I refuse to accept that our only options are watching you fade or dying together. There's always another path. You just have to be brave enough to seek it. The lights around us pulsed brighter, as if responding to my conviction. Adrian studied me with an intensity that peered into my soul. Finally, he spoke. There are legends, tales of mortals who learn to breathe water, to adapt to life beneath the waves. But the process is dangerous, and the price of failure is death. Tell me what I need to do. Over the next week, Adrian shared everything he knew about the old magic. We discovered that the bioluminescent creatures weren't simply remnants of his power. They were keys to transformation. Their light contained the essence of his world, and with proper preparation, they could change a mortal's nature. The ritual required precise timing, midnight during the new moon when the barrier between worlds was thinnest. I would need to drink a mixture of seawater and the creature's essence, then fully submerge in the ocean. If successful, my body would adapt to life underwater. If not... The night of the new moon arrived too quickly, and not quickly enough. The sandbar had shrunk to a fraction of its original size, and Adrian's form was so transparent that starlight shone through him. "Are you certain?" he asked one final time, his voice carrying the weight of centuries. "Once begun, there's no turning back." "I've never been more certain of anything." I took his hand, feeling the cool liquid substance of his skin against mine. "I'm not letting you face eternity alone." He pulled me close, and for the first time, pressed his lips to mine. The kiss tasted of salt and magic and possibility, of ancient depths and new beginnings. When we parted, the lights around us blazed brighter than I'd seen in weeks. "The curse will still break when I fully embrace my love for you," he warned. "The sandbar will still collapse. Then we'd better be ready to swim." I smiled, attempting to project more confidence than I felt. The mixture of seawater and essence glowed like liquid starlight in the shell Adrian had prepared. It smelled of ocean depths and ancient magic, of hope and transformation. The taste defied description, like drinking moonlight and darkness and dreams all at once. Heat spread through my body like lightning through water, making each breath a struggle. Adrian steadied me as I swayed, his touch growing more solid as the magic took effect. "Ready?" I nodded, unable to speak through the burning in my throat. Together, we walked to the edge of the sandbar. The water below was black in the moonless night, but I could see the bioluminescent creatures gathering in unprecedented numbers, their light turning the depths into a galaxy of blue-green stars. "I love you," Adrian whispered, and I felt the sandbar begin to crumble beneath our feet. "I love you too." The words escaped as we fell. The water closed over my head, cold and dark and terrifying. For an eternal moment, panic seized me. I couldn't breathe, couldn't see, couldn't tell up from down. Then Adrian's arms were around me, and the burning in my throat transformed into something miraculous. My lungs adapted, drawing oxygen from the water as naturally as air. I opened my eyes to a world of wonder. The bioluminescent creatures swirled around us in a triumphant dance, their light revealing an underwater landscape I'd never imagined. Adrian's true form was magnificent, his human appearance giving way to something both beautiful and strange, with scales that shimmered like opals and eyes that held all the mystery of the deep. He was solid now, fully restored, no longer bound by the curse that had held him for so long. And I was transformed. Not exactly like him, but no longer fully human either. Something in between, capable of living in both worlds. We rose through the water together, breaking the surface to find the sandbar completely gone. The beach looked different from this perspective, distant and dreamlike, as if it belonged to another life entirely. "What now?" I asked, discovering I could speak normally despite the changes. Adrian smiled, and the ocean lit up around us. "Now we explore. There are wonders in this world you've never dreamed of, and I want to show you all of them." Hand in hand, we dove beneath the waves, leaving the shore behind. The bioluminescent creatures led the way, their light guiding us toward new adventures and possibilities. I had chosen love over safety, magic over the familiar, and in doing so, found a way to have both. The curse was broken, but the real magic was just beginning. Ahead lay a lifetime of discovering the mysteries of the deep, of learning to navigate between two worlds, of building a love that defied the boundaries of nature itself. Each day would bring new wonders, and each night new adventures, as we explored the endless expanse of a life lived between sea and shore, between magic and mortality, between what was and what could be. The lunar veil shimmered above me like a gossamer curtain of starlight, but something darker lurked behind its ethereal beauty. Blood had been spilled on nights like this before. Witch blood, vampire blood, all of it seeping into the earth beneath my feet. I could feel it calling to my magic, ancient violence resonating with the power that coursed through my veins. I hadn't meant to venture this far from the Coven's sanctuary. The Boundary Woods held dangers far worse than vampires, things that slithered through shadow and whispered promises that could drive even the strongest witch mad. But something pulled me forward, each step carrying me deeper into the midnight realm where magic grew wild and untamed. My fingers tingled with excess energy, small sparks of violet light dancing between them. The magic within me responded to the rare alignment above, growing stronger with each passing moment. As a daughter of the enchanted coven, I'd been taught to fear this raw power, to contain it within the strict boundaries of our ancient laws. We all knew the stories of witches who'd let their power run unchecked, how they'd transformed into creatures of pure magic, their humanity burning away like morning mist. I reached a clearing where moonlight pooled like liquid silver on the grass. The rational part of my mind urged me to turn back, to return to the safety of the Coven's walls. Instead, I lifted my face to the stars and let my power flow freely for the first time in my life. Purple light erupted from my palms, weaving through the air in intricate patterns that matched the rhythm of my heartbeat. The magic sang through my blood, sweet and seductive, promising things I'd never dared to dream. "Beautiful," a voice murmured from the shadows, rich as dark honey and just as dangerous. I spun around, magic crackling defensively around my fingers. He emerged from the darkness like a figure from a dream, tall and elegant, with features that seemed carved from marble. But it was his eyes that caught me, ancient and sorrowful despite the gentle smile playing at his lips. They held centuries of pain, of watching civilizations rise and fall, of loving and losing until the weight of memory became almost unbearable. I knew instantly what he was. Vampire. The air grew thick with the scent of copper and roses, his power manifesting in response to mine. I'd been taught that vampire magic was corrupt, a twisted mockery of true power. But this was something else entirely. Dark and intoxicating, yes, but with an underlying complexity that called to something deep within my soul. You should run, he said softly, though he made no move to attack. His fangs gleamed in the moonlight, not threateningly, but as a reminder of what he was, what he needed to survive. That would be the wise choice. I should have. Every lesson, every warning, every story I'd ever heard screamed at me to flee. The last witch who'd fallen for a vampire's charms had been found drained and cold, her magic twisted into something that still haunted the border woods. But beneath his predator's grace, I sensed a pain that echoed my own loneliness. I'm not afraid. No, he mused, taking a careful step closer. The shadows seemed to curl around him like loyal pets. You're not, are you? I'm Marcus. Lola. The name slipped out before I could stop it. My magic, rather than recoiling from his darkness as I'd been taught it would, reached for him like tendrils of light-seeking warmth. The air between us crackled with possibility and danger. He noticed, his eyes widening slightly as purple sparkles danced in the air between us. They mixed with his shadows, creating complex patterns. Your power. It's extraordinary. I've never seen anything like it. Most witchlight burns us, but yours? It's stronger tonight, under the lunar veil. I didn't know why I was telling him this, sharing secrets with a creature I'd been raised to despise. Yet something about his presence felt right, as if the universe itself had orchestrated this moment. The old books say the veil thins the boundaries between all realms, life and death, light and shadow. Yes, Marcus said, now close enough that I could see flecks of blood red in his dark eyes. It strips away illusion, showing us things as they truly are. His hand lifted, hesitating just shy of touching the magic that swirled around me. May I? I nodded, my breath catching as his fingers brushed through the violet light. Instead of dissipating as I expected, my magic intensified, wrapping around his hand like a caress. Where it touched him, his shadows transformed, becoming something neither light nor dark, but beautifully, terrifyingly other. A gasp escaped him, wonder replacing the sorrow in his expression. Impossible, he whispered. I haven't felt anything so purely alive in centuries. His voice caught on the word alive, centuries of loss echoing in that single syllable. My heart raced as he stepped closer still, our energies intertwining in the space between us. Everything I'd been taught about vampires, their coldness, their cruelty, their emptiness, crumbled in the face of the gentle awe I saw in Marcus's eyes. Yet I couldn't forget what he was. Even now, I could sense the predator beneath his civilized veneer, the hunger that was as much a part of him as magic was of me. That first night changed everything. We talked until dawn threatened the horizon, sharing pieces of ourselves that we'd never dared show anyone else. He told me of his turning centuries ago, of watching everyone he loved grow old and die while he remained unchanged, of the madness that took some vampires after their first century, when the weight of accumulated time became too much to bear. I spoke of the suffocating weight of coven expectations, of being the most powerful witch of my generation, but never being allowed to fully embrace that power, of the whispers that followed me, wondering if I'd follow in my grandmother's footsteps. They'd executed her for dark magic when I was young. Her screams still haunted my dreams. I should go, I said finally, though every fiber of my being protested the idea of leaving. The coven will notice my absence, and they will be looking for me. The stronger a witch's power, the more closely she was watched. Marcus caught my hand as I turned to leave, his touch sending shivers of electricity through my entire body. His skin was cool, but everywhere our flesh met, heat bloomed. Will you come back tomorrow night? I knew I shouldn't. The penalty for consorting with vampires was severe, exile at best, a fate worse than death at worst. The coven had ways of binding a witch's power that left her trapped inside her own mind, aware but unable to access the magic that was as essential as breathing. But looking into his eyes, I couldn't imagine staying away. Yes. That promise marked the beginning of our secret romance. Night after night, I slipped away from the coven to meet him in our clearing. Sometimes we talked for hours, sharing stories and dreams. Other times we sat in comfortable silence, my magic dancing around us both as he held me close. Always, there was the underlying current of danger, the knowledge that discovery would mean destruction for us both. Marcus showed me a different side of vampire nature than the stories I'd been told. He was thoughtful, kind, and carried a deep appreciation for beauty that centuries of life hadn't diminished. When he looked at me, I felt truly seen for the first time in my life. Yet he never hid his darker nature. I learned to recognize the signs of his hunger, the way his eyes tracked the pulse in my throat, how his fangs would emerge when passion ran high. Our first kiss happened beneath a crescent moon. His lips were cool against mine, but they warmed quickly as magic sparked between us. I tasted copper as his fangs grazed my lower lip, not breaking the skin, but promising darker pleasures. The moment we touched, power surged through me like never before, turning every nerve ending to starlight. Marcus pulled back with a gasp, his eyes wide with wonder and tinged with crimson. "Your magic," he breathed. "It's inside me. I can feel it." A drop of my blood stained his lips, and where it touched him, his skin seemed to glow from within. I could feel him too, the depth of his emotions, the weight of his years, the growing light in his soul that matched the glow in mine. But I also felt his darkness, the predator's instincts that were as much a part of him as his heart. It should have frightened me. Instead, it thrilled me. From that moment on, our bond grew stronger with each passing night. My magic responded to his presence instinctively, reaching for him even before I saw him. And though he had no magic of his own, I swore I could feel echoes of power stirring in him when we were together. Sometimes, in moments of passion, my magic would sink into him completely, making his eyes glow with violet fire. But paradise, as always, proved fleeting. The first sign of trouble came in the form of whispers among the coven elders, stories of strange magical disturbances in the boundary woods, of power signatures that didn't match any known spells. Worse were the reports of dead animals found drained of blood, their bodies surrounded by circles of wildflowers that bloomed out of season, vampire feeding mixed with witch magic, in a way that terrified both sides. I knew they were sensing the unique blend of my magic with Marcus's vampire energy. But I couldn't stop meeting him. The thought of never seeing him again hurt more than any punishment the coven could devise. My power grew stronger with each encounter, responding to his darkness in ways that both thrilled and frightened me. The vampire clan noticed too. Marcus told me of growing suspicion among his kind, of questions about where he disappeared to each night. Some claimed they could smell witch magic on him, while others whispered that he was changing, becoming something neither fully vampire nor fully human. We knew discovery was inevitable, but we clung to our stolen moments with desperate intensity. Each kiss carried the taste of danger, each touch held the possibility of revelation. My magic began to show traces of shadow, while Marcus's vampire nature took on aspects of light. We were changing each other in fundamental ways, becoming something entirely new. The breaking point came during the harvest moon. Blood magic ran strongest on such nights, and both vampires and witches grew more dangerous with its influence. We'd been careless, too lost in each other to notice the search parties until they were upon us. Witches and vampires converged on our clearing from all sides, their shock at finding us together quickly turning to rage. Abomination. The coven leader's voice cracked like thunder as she saw Marcus's arms around me. my magic wrapped protectively around us both. Her own power manifested as sickly green light that reeked of decay, proof that her public face of purity hid darker practices. You dare corrupt one of our own. The vampire elder's response was equally venomous, his ancient form shifting between man and monster as his control slipped. Marcus, you dishonor your entire bloodline by consorting with this witch. Have you forgotten what their kind did to your sister? I felt Marcus tense beside me, an old pain flaring through our bond. Later, he would tell me the full story, how his sister had fallen in love with a witch centuries ago, how the coven had turned her into a living weapon against her own kind. But in that moment, his voice remained steady. The only dishonor is in clinging to ancient hatred when love offers a better way. Love? The coven leader spat the word like poison, and the grass withered where her spittle landed. There can be no love between light and shadow. Lola, step away from that creature now, and perhaps we can cleanse you of this taint. But I stood my ground, power building around me like a storm. Where my magic met Marcus's darkness, it created something new. Neither light nor shadow, but a force that made reality itself shudder. He's not the monster here. You are. All of you. Letting blind prejudice rule your hearts. The battle that followed was chaos. Spells and vampire powers clashed as both sides attempted to tear us apart. Marcus and I fought back to back, his strength complementing my magic in perfect harmony. Blood and power mingled in the air as ancient enemies unleashed centuries of hatred. But we were badly outnumbered, and eventually, they separated us. As they dragged us away from one another, I heard Marcus's voice in my mind, stronger than ever before. The Astral Grove. It's real, Lola. Meet me at the ancient oak when the moon is highest tomorrow night. We'll find it together. They locked me in the coven's strongest containment chamber, thinking their wards would hold me. The walls were carved with runes of binding and painted with the blood of sacrificed magical creatures. They didn't understand that my power had grown beyond their comprehension since meeting Marcus. Love had transformed my magic into something entirely new. I waited until the moon reached its peak, before shattering their wards like glass. The backlash killed the guards instantly, their bodies turning to ash as the corrupted magic they'd wielded consumed them from within. I felt a moment of regret, but not guilt. They'd chosen their path, as I had chosen mine. The ancient oak wasn't far. It stood exactly halfway between Coven and vampire territories, marking the boundary line neither side was supposed to cross. Its branches had been watered with blood from both sides over the centuries, creating a nexus of dark power that made my skin crawl. Marcus was already there when I arrived, looking battle-worn but determined. Fresh blood stained his lips. He'd had to fight his way out, too. I knew you'd come. He pulled me close, kissing me with fierce desperation before pulling back to cup my face in his hands. The Astral Grove lies 3 days' journey to the north, hidden in a valley where the veils between worlds are thinnest. But the path will be dangerous. Both sides will hunt us. I don't care, I said, meaning it with every fiber of my being. My magic reached for him instinctively, purple light twining with his shadows until it was impossible to tell where one ended and the other began. I choose you, Marcus. I choose us. We ran that night, and every night that followed. During the day, Marcus took shelter in whatever safe spaces we could find, while I wove protection spells around us. At night, we traveled swiftly through shadow and starlight, always moving closer to our destination. They pursued us relentlessly. Witch hunters on spelled brooms filled the skies while vampire trackers stalked the ground. More than once we nearly fell into their traps. But each time, our bond grew stronger. My magic and his vampiric abilities began to blend in ways that should have been impossible, creating something entirely new. We encountered other horrors in the dark places between settlements, things that hunted both witch and vampire alike. Shapeshifters drunk on moonlight, ancient spirits hungry for the taste of magic, demons drawn to the unique power our union created. Each battle left us stronger, but also more changed, our very natures shifting into something that had never existed before. On the third night, as we crested a moonlit hill, we saw it. A valley filled with trees that glowed with their own inner light, their leaves shimmering with colors that didn't exist in our world. The astral grove. But something was wrong. The light pulsed like a heartbeat, and shadows writhed between the trees in ways that defied natural law. Our pursuers had caught up. Both coven and clan surrounded us, cutting off all escape routes except forward. We ran for the grove's entrance, magic and shadow swirling around us as spells and attacks rained down from all sides. Just before we reached the threshold, the coven leader appeared in front of us, her power manifesting as burning white light that barely concealed the corruption at its core. "You'll destroy everything we've built, everything we've protected for generations." "No," I said, raising my hand as Marcus stood beside me, our powers perfectly united. "We'll build something better." Power exploded from us both, my magic and his darkness weaving together into something beautiful and terrible. The combined force knocked our pursuers back, creating an opening just wide enough to slip through. But it also changed them, our unified power rewriting the very essence of those it touched. Witches gasped as shadows curled through their light, while vampires hissed as sparks of magic ignited in their blood. We crossed into the astral grove hand in hand. The moment we passed the boundary, everything changed. Power thrummed through the air around us, ancient and alive and hungry. The trees sang with voices like silver bells, but their song spoke of blood and transformation as much as beauty. A figure materialized before us, neither witch nor vampire, but something older than both. Her form shifted like smoke, but her eyes remained fixed on our joined hands. Where she walked, reality rippled like water, showing glimpses of other worlds, other possibilities. "You seek sanctuary," she said, her voice echoing with the weight of ages. "We seek acceptance," Marcus corrected gently, though his grip on my hand tightened. "A place where love matters more than ancient divisions." The figure smiled, and the entire grove seemed to brighten. Yet in that light, I saw the truth. This was no simple paradise, but a place of power and transformation. "Show me your hearts." Light filled us both, not the burning white of coven magic or the darkness of vampire power, but something in between, something new. In that moment, I felt everything Marcus felt, saw every memory that had shaped him, the pain of his turning, the loneliness of centuries, the joy of finding me. And he saw me too, all of me, every dream and fear and hope I'd ever held. "Your love has already changed the world," the figure said softly. "Look." We turned to see our pursuers frozen at the grove's entrance, watching in wonder as our combined power transformed the very air around them. Where light and shadow met, they created colors never seen before in our world. The hatred in their eyes slowly gave way to understanding as they witnessed what was possible when ancient enemies chose love instead of fear. The figure raised her hands, and the grove's power swept outward like a tide, touching everyone present. "The walls between your peoples have stood for too long. Perhaps it's time for new traditions to take root." Changes rippled through both crowds. Witches' magic began to shimmer with hints of shadow, while darkness around the vampires sparked with points of light. The transformation was beautiful to behold, not a corruption of either side, but an evolution into something greater than both. "The grove accepts you," the figure declared, "and through you, it accepts all who choose love over hatred. You may make your home here, and any others who wish to follow your path will be welcomed as well." As the ancient figure's words echoed through the grove, I watched in awe as magic rippled outward like waves on a moonlit lake. Each pulse of power brought more changes, transforming the hatred that had divided our peoples for centuries into something beautiful and new. Marcus drew me close, his touch sending sparks of violet light dancing across my skin. "Look," he whispered, gesturing to where the coven leader stood frozen in wonder. Her sickly green magic had transformed into swirls of emerald and silver, darkness and light weaving together in perfect harmony. The vampire elder approached us slowly, his ancient eyes wide with revelation. The predatory edge that had always marked his kind had softened, tempered by traces of witch light that glimmered beneath his skin. "In all my centuries," he murmured, "I never imagined such beauty could exist." Our magics continued to blend and evolve, creating patterns of light and shadow that danced through the air like the aurora borealis. Where they touched the grove's crystalline trees, new blooms burst forth, flowers that glowed with their own inner light and spread a sense of peace through all who beheld them. "The path you've chosen will not be easy," the grove's guardian cautioned, her form shifting like smoke in the wind. "To bridge two worlds requires great strength of heart. Are you prepared for what lies ahead?" I looked at Marcus, seeing in his eyes the same certainty I felt in my soul. Our bond hummed between us, stronger than ever. "We are," we answered as one. She nodded, and the grove itself seemed to bow in response. "Then let this place be your sanctuary and your home. Here, you may build the future you dream of, where others like you can find acceptance and peace." As if responding to her words, the grove began to change. The glowing trees parted, revealing a path that led deeper into the heart of this magical realm. Along its edges, small cottages grew from the living wood, each one a perfect blend of witchcraft and vampire aesthetics. Gardens flourished with night-blooming flowers that sparkled with magical energy. "It's perfect," I breathed, watching as more changes rippled outward. A great hall emerged in the center of the grove, its walls transparent like crystal, but strong as diamond. Within its depths, I could see spaces for teaching, for healing, for bringing together those who sought to transcend the old divisions. Marcus pulled me closer, pressing a gentle kiss to my temple. His touch sent waves of pleasure through our bond, and I felt his joy mingling with mine. "Our home," he murmured against my skin, "the beginning of something new." Others stepped forward, young witches whose power had never quite fit the coven's rigid structures, vampires who had grown weary of endless darkness. In their eyes, I saw the same longing for acceptance that had first drawn Marcus and me together. The Guardian watched with approval as small groups began to explore the grove, their magics already starting to shift and change. "Remember," she said softly, "love is the greatest magic of all. Let it guide you as you build this new community." With those words, she faded into the mist, leaving us to begin our new life. The next few months passed in a blur of activity as we worked to establish our haven. Marcus and I took up residence in a cottage near the grove's heart, where morning sun filtered through enchanted windows that protected him from its harmful rays. Each night, we walked through the grove together, our combined power helping to strengthen the magical barriers that kept our sanctuary safe. More seekers arrived with each passing moon, those who dreamed of a world where love knew no boundaries. We welcomed them all, teaching them to embrace the beautiful fusion of light and shadow that our love had birthed. Our cottage became a place of warmth and tender moments. I learned to delight in the way Marcus would pull me into his arms as sunrise approached, his cool skin warming wherever our flesh met. He discovered a passion for tending the magical gardens, his former darkness now nurturing new life. On clear nights, we would lie in a meadow of luminous flowers, watching as our magics danced together in the star-filled sky. His fingers would trace patterns on my skin, each touch igniting sparks of pleasure that made the very air shimmer around us. In those moments, the weight of centuries seemed to lift from his shoulders, replaced by a peace I'd never seen before. The transformation of our peoples continued, spreading beyond the grove's boundaries. Those who had once hunted us now sought our guidance, drawn by the promise of evolution rather than corruption. The old hatred began to fade, replaced by curiosity and hope. One evening, as we sat entwined on our cottage's porch, watching the sunset paint the grove in shades of gold and purple, Marcus touched my face with infinite tenderness. "Do you ever regret it?" he asked softly. "Leaving everything behind?" I turned to kiss his palm, feeling our magic surge at the contact. "Never," I assured him. "You are my home now. This place, this life we're building together, it's everything I never knew I needed." His smile lit up the growing darkness, and when he kissed me, I tasted the future on his lips. Endless possibilities stretching out before us like the star-filled sky above. Our magic swirled around us, light and shadow dancing together in perfect harmony. In the years that followed, our haven grew into a beacon of hope for both witches and vampires. The grove blossomed under our care, its magic evolving to support the unique blend of powers that now called it home. Children born to our community manifested abilities never seen before: healing shadows, protective darkness, light that nurtured rather than burned. Marcus and I remained at its heart, our love growing stronger with each passing season. The weight of immortality that had once tormented him became a gift rather than a curse, offering us countless years to explore the depths of our connection and watch our dream take root. Every night, as I fall asleep in his arms, I think about that first meeting in the Boundary Woods. How the lunar veil had lifted ancient shrouds, allowing us to see past centuries of prejudice to the truth in one another's hearts. Our love had changed more than just ourselves. It had opened a door to a future where light and shadow could dance together in endless, beautiful possibility. The grove pulses with magic around us, a living testament to the power of choosing love over fear. And as I drift into dreams, wrapped in Marcus's embrace and surrounded by the home we've built together, I know that every step of our journey, every hardship we faced, led us exactly where we were meant to be. In the end, it wasn't about light conquering darkness or shadow subduing light. It was about finding the beauty that exists in between, in the sacred space where opposites meet and transform into something greater than either could be alone. Our love had written a new story, one that would echo through generations to come, proving that the most powerful magic of all lies in having the courage to choose love again and again with every beat of our eternal hearts. The villagers called them the Eternal Mountains, the towering peaks that pierced the clouds like ancient spears of ice. From my vantage point in my steam-powered snowmobile, their jagged silhouettes cut against the pewter sky like a crown of crystal thorns. I called them my next great challenge, though the word challenge felt inadequate as I watched storm clouds gather around their peaks, dark and heavy with winter's fury. As my vehicle crawled up the narrow mountain path, the engine's steady purr competed with the howling wind. The instrument panel cast a warm glow of brass and copper light across my gloved hands, the metal surfaces polished to mirror brightness from years of use. Steam hissed through carefully calibrated valves, smelling of oil and metal and adventure. Beyond the reinforced glass windows, snowflakes danced in hypnotic patterns, each unique crystal catching the light before joining its brethren in the deepening drifts. I hadn't come to these remote heights for the legends, though the innkeeper in the last town had filled my ears with tales of the mysterious snow maiden who protected these peaks. I still remembered how her eyes had widened when I mentioned my destination, how her weathered hands had clutched at her shawl as she spoke of a being who walked through blizzards as easily as summer breezes. her presence turning even the deadliest storms into gentle snowfall. "She's saved us all, one way or another," the innkeeper had said, her voice dropping to a whisper heavy with reverence. "But never look directly at her, my boy. Her beauty freezes the heart as surely as the deepest winter." I had smiled politely, more focused on checking my equipment than heeding supernatural warnings. I sought inspiration for my next invention. Perhaps something to help humanity survive in these harsh climates. My workshop back in the city was filled with half-finished projects, each one reaching toward the same goal: bridging the gap between human fragility and nature's raw power. Yet, as the storm intensified and my visibility dropped to mere feet, those dismissed warnings began to echo in my mind. The wind's howl took on an almost musical quality, like a chorus of voices just beyond comprehension. The snow itself seemed to move with purpose, swirling in patterns too precise to be natural. The first sign of real trouble came with a sound like thunder, except thunder had no place in a snowstorm. I looked up through the glass dome of my vehicle to see a wall of white racing down the mountainside. The avalanche moved faster than any natural phenomenon should, as if driven by an intelligent malice. In the heart of the cascading snow, I could have sworn I saw a figure of darker white, like a shadow cast by winter itself. I gunned the engine, but the snow was already upon me. The world turned white, then black. Metal screamed as my vehicle was tossed like a child's toy. Glass cracked in crystalline spider webs across my vision. The last thing I remembered was a flash of silver-white hair and eyes that glowed like the heart of a glacier, filled with an ancient sorrow that called to something deep within my soul. When I woke, I lay in a cave of ice that sparkled with its own inner light. Layers of color shifted through the frozen walls, deep blues, subtle purples, hints of green, creating an aurora in miniature. My body should have been frozen, but warmth emanated from the very walls around me, as if the ice itself had been transformed into something that defied natural law. And there she stood, the figure from my fading memories, real as the cold air in my lungs, real and more breathtaking than any legend could have prepared me for. Her dress seemed woven from snowflakes, each movement creating cascades of crystalline light that played across the cave walls. Her skin held the pale luminescence of moonlight on fresh snow, translucent enough that I could almost see the gentle pulse of power beneath. Her hair floated around her face as if suspended in water, each strand catching and refracting light like strands of living crystal. But it was her eyes that captured me, blue as the deepest ice, ancient and lonely as winter itself. Within their depths, I saw centuries of solitude, of watching mortal lives flash by like summer flowers, while she remained unchanging as the eternal snows. In that moment, all my scientific certainties crumbled like frost beneath the sun. "You shouldn't have come here, Ren Nakamura," she said, her voice like wind through icicles, musical and sharp and haunting. "These mountains are not safe for dreamers." Frost spiraled across the cave floor where she stepped, creating intricate patterns that reminded me of the blueprints scattered across my workshop desk. I pushed myself up, wincing at my bruised muscles. The air around me sparkled with tiny ice crystals that caught the ethereal light, creating halos of rainbow color. "You know my name? I know all who enter my domain." She moved closer, and the air around her shimmered with frost that smelled of winter roses and pine needles. Her presence brought a chill that somehow felt intimate rather than threatening, like the first breath of winter through an open window. "Just as I know you don't believe in me. The Snow Maiden of legend." I couldn't keep the wonder from my voice. All my scientific certainties melted in her presence, replaced by a deeper kind of knowing. My fingers itched to reach for her, to prove her solidity despite her ethereal appearance. "But you're real. Real enough to save you." Her expression softened slightly, and the temperature in the cave rose a fraction. A strand of her crystalline hair drifted close enough to brush my cheek, leaving a trail of tingling warmth and cold that lingered like a caress. "But you must leave when the storm passes. There are forces stirring in these mountains that even I cannot protect you from." "What forces? What are you protecting these people from?" I took a step toward her, drawn by an impulse I couldn't explain. The air between us grew thick with tension, like the moment before lightning strikes. She turned away, her form becoming translucent at the edges. The scent of winter roses intensified, mixing with an ancient smell of ice and stone. "Some questions are better left in the snow, inventor. For now, rest. Dawn comes soon." Her voice carried notes of longing that belied her warning words. "Dreams are dangerous things in these mountains. They have a way of coming true." Before I could respond, she melted into the air like snow in sunlight, leaving only a lingering trace of her presence. A slight warmth in the usually bitter cold, a faint shimmer in the air, and the haunting sense of something vital left unfinished. When I woke again, I lay in a normal cave, my vehicle somehow intact beside me. Sunlight filtered through a thin sheet of ice across the entrance, creating rainbow patterns that danced across the stone walls. Only a lingering scent of winter roses suggested I hadn't dreamed the whole encounter. I should have listened. Should have descended the mountain and returned to my comfortable workshop in the city, where science made sense and magic was safely confined to children's stories. But her eyes haunted me. Not their supernatural glow, but the profound solitude I'd glimpsed within them. No one should carry such loneliness, not even a spirit of winter. The village of Blythewood welcomed me with surprised warmth that contrasted sharply with the biting mountain air. Smoke rose from stone chimneys in lazy spirals, carrying the scent of pine wood and cooking spices. Children played in the snow-covered streets, their laughter bright as silver bells, while adults went about their work with the unhurried confidence of those long adapted to winter's ways. Few outsiders brave the high passes, the village elder told me over steaming cups of pine needle tea. The liquid glowed amber in carved crystal cups that caught and reflected the firelight. Her wrinkled hands cupped her drink as she studied me with eyes wise as the mountains themselves. "The Snow Maiden guides worthy travelers to us," they say. "Perhaps she sees something in you." I didn't tell her about my encounter in the cave, but my silence seemed answer enough. She nodded as if confirming something to herself and pressed a small crystal into my palm. It felt warm despite its icy appearance, pulsing gently like a tiny heartbeat. "For protection," she said simply, "and perhaps for connection." I set up my workshop in an abandoned barn at the village edge, close to the wild boundaries of the forest where civilization melted into winter's domain. The building's weathered wooden walls held the patina of ages, smooth and silver as frost. I spent the first days reinforcing the structure, adding my own inventions: copper pipes that carried steam heat, brass valves that regulated temperature, delicate instruments that measured the mountain's moods. The villagers watched my work with curious respect, bringing gifts of thick blankets woven with patterns of snowflakes and stars, jars of preserved mountain berries that burst with summer's sweetness, and stories. Always stories, each one adding another layer to my understanding of their mysterious protector. By day, I worked on my inventions, new heating systems that didn't fight against the cold but worked in harmony with it, more efficient snow-clearing devices that moved with winter's natural rhythms. The crystal the elder had given me sat on my workbench, its warm pulse synchronizing with my heartbeat as I worked. By night, I listened to the villagers' tales of their mysterious protector. They spoke of blizzards calmed by her presence, of dying crops saved by her blessed frost, of children rescued from winter's grasp. In their stories, she was both terrible and tender, as changeable as the mountain weather, yet as constant as the eternal snows. Yet none had seen her as I had. None knew she could speak, or that she bore such weight in her immortal heart. None mentioned the profound loneliness I'd glimpsed in her glacier blue eyes. The second time I saw her, I was tracking an unusual energy reading deep in the forest. My instruments had detected something that defied scientific explanation. A cold that burned, a power that made the compass needle spin in impossible directions. The crystal in my pocket pulsed stronger with each step into the wilderness. The forest itself seemed to hold its breath. Snow fell in perfect silence, each flake drifting with deliberate grace. Ice coated the tree branches in layers that caught the fading light, creating a cathedral of frozen beauty. My breath fogged in the air, carrying the scent of pine and something sweeter, winter roses. She emerged from a curtain of falling snow, more substantial than before. Her presence brought that familiar mix of warmth and cold that I'd started to crave like a fever. Frost patterns spiraled out from her feet, creating trails of ice that matched the racing of my heart. I warned you to leave. Her voice carried notes of concern that belied her stern words. A snowflake landed on her cheek and didn't melt, adding to her crystalline beauty. I couldn't. The truth fell from my lips like fresh snow, pure and unstoppable. My fingers tightened around the crystal in my pocket, feeling its pulse quicken to match my own. Not without understanding. Understanding brings only pain, Ren. She spoke my name like a half-forgotten lullaby, each syllable carrying centuries of longing. The air between us grew thick with unspoken possibilities. Knowledge is not always a gift. Then let me share the burden of it. I stepped closer, watching the frost patterns shift and swirl around her feet in response to her emotions. You don't have to carry it alone. She studied me for a long moment, her eternal winter meeting my mortal warmth. The snow between us fell slower. Finally, she held out her hand. Frost immediately coated my glove where she touched it, but underneath, I felt a warmth that defied explanation. Come, she whispered, her voice carrying both invitation and warning. There is something you should see. She led me deeper into the forest, where the trees grew close and dark. Our footsteps left matching prints in the fresh snow, hers perfect crystals that sparkled with inner light, mine merely mortal impressions beside them. The crystal in my pocket grew warmer with each step, its pulse matching the rhythm of our movement. In a clearing stood an ancient shrine, its stone surfaces carved with scenes that caught and held the eye. Warriors battling a force of pure winter. A maiden stepping between humanity and protection. A sacrifice that echoed through centuries. At its center, a crystal much like mine pulsed with a cold blue light that seemed to reach for the snow maiden like a lover's touch. Long ago, she said, her voice taking on the cadence of ancient memory. These mountains faced a force that sought to plunge the world into endless winter. The people here had learned to live in harmony with the cold, but this entity, the Frost King, wanted only destruction. His power turned snow to steel, ice to obsidian, winter itself into a weapon. She touched the shrine's surface, and frost spread from her fingers, highlighting the carvings until they seemed to move. A young priestess discovered that the Frost King's power could be bound by an equal and opposite force, the warmth of human love and sacrifice. She offered herself, using her warmth and humanity as the price for his imprisonment. She became the first snow maiden, forever walking the boundary between human and spirit. You're her descendant? I asked, though in my heart I already knew the answer. I am her. She turned to me, and in her eyes I saw centuries of solitude. Immortality was part of the price. Each winter, I feel more of my humanity slip away as I maintain his bonds. Each summer, I remember less of what it meant to be human. Her hand still rested on the shrine, and I covered it with mine. The cold bit deep, but I welcomed it. There has to be another way. a balance between sacrifice and survival. Why would you risk yourself for me? Her voice held wonder and fear in equal measure. Snowflakes swirled between us, carrying the scent of winter roses and possibility. Because I see you, I said simply. Not the legend, not the spirit, but you. And no one should face eternity alone. Something shifted in her eyes then, a thaw in glaciers that had stood frozen for centuries. The crystal's pulse quickened, matching the rhythm of our shared breath. Your warmth calls to me, Ren. Like spring calls to winter, like dawn calls to dusk. But it also endangers you. Her free hand rose to cup my cheek, and frost bloomed across my skin like a caress. The colder I become, the more I hunger for mortal heat. Then take it. I turned my face into her touch, though every instinct warned against it. The cold burned, but beneath it lay a warmth I'd never known. Take what you need. It would destroy you. Fear crept into her voice. Not of me, but for me. I don't believe that. Another step closer. Frost crawled up my sleeves, but I didn't retreat. The crystal in my pocket blazed with warmth, counterpoint to her winter chill. You've spent centuries protecting others. Let someone protect you for once. The kiss, when it came, burned with cold fire. Frost spread across my skin, but beneath it, I felt her trembling with long-denied warmth. Her lips were soft as new snow, sweet as ice wine. For a moment, we stood suspended between mortal and immortal, winter and spring, duty and desire. The crystals, both hers and mine, pulsed in harmony, creating a symphony of light and power. Then the shrine's crystal flared with violent light, and she pushed me away. He feels it, she gasped. My weakness, my want. Ice spread from her feet, crackling across the clearing with predatory intent. Run. But I couldn't leave her. Not now. Not ever. Now, Ren! She shouted, as a force stronger than life and deadlier than death engulfed her in its frosty fury. Frightened and freezing, I obeyed her command. I ran, far and fast, questioning my decision to leave her, ashamed that I wasn't brave enough to stay. Weeks passed in a chilling blur, a dance of advance and retreat. By day, I worked frantically in my workshop, studying the old stories, combining ancient wisdom with modern science. Steam and ice, copper and crystal, human ingenuity and eternal magic. Surely there was a way to bridge these worlds. By night, she came to me, drawn by my warmth, even as she feared it would destroy us both. We shared moments stolen from winter itself, her cool fingers tracing my inventions with curiosity, my hands teaching her to feel again through layers of protective cloth. Each touch burned with cold, but each burn struck deeper into her frozen heart, awakening feelings she'd thought lost to centuries of ice. Tell me about the world beyond the mountains, she would ask, as we sat in my workshop, surrounded by the gentle hiss of steam and the ticking of delicate instruments. I described the wonders I'd seen, the machines I'd built, the dreams I still chased. In return, she shared fragments of her human life, memories preserved like flowers in ice, a mother's smile, a sister's laugh, the taste of fresh bread on winter mornings. But as our connection grew stronger, so did the Frost King's attacks. Storms raged with unnatural fury. Avalanches struck without warning. The very air grew sharp with malicious cold that sought to extinguish all warmth. He feeds on winter's power, she explained one night, as we huddled in my workshop while the wind howled outside. Her hands traced patterns in the frost on my windows, patterns that matched the designs scattered across my workbench. And I am winter-made flesh. The more I feel, the more power I release into the world, the more his prison weakens. Then we'll find another source of power. I showed her my latest invention, a device that could channel thermal energy, converting heat to cold and back again. Brass pipes twisted like frozen vines, copper coils hummed with contained power, and at its heart sat the crystal the elder had given me, pulsing with possibility. If we can't break the cycle, we'll change it. She touched the device, leaving swirls of frost in her wake. You still think science can solve what magic created? I think love can solve what loneliness created. I caught her hand, ignoring the cold that instantly numbed my fingers. The crystal flared brighter at our touch. Your predecessor used sacrifice to bind him. But what if the answer isn't in losing humanity, but in sharing it? Understanding dawned in her winter-bright eyes. A balance. Yes. Not warm defeating cold, or cold consuming warm, but both existing together, strengthening one another. The storm outside intensified, as if the Frost King himself raged against our discovery. The windows rattled, ice crept across the walls. But in that moment, holding her gradually warming hand, I felt nothing but hope. It took us 3 more days to perfect the device. 3 days of endless storms. 3 days of the village huddling in fear while their protector and a foreign inventor gambled with forces beyond mortal understanding. The villagers brought us supplies without question, their trust in her extending to include me, the outsider who dared to love winter itself. When the final night came, we stood before the ancient shrine as the worst blizzard in living memory raged around us. The crystal prison pulsed with blinding light, ice spreading from its base like reaching fingers. Wind-driven snow carved patterns in the air, beautiful and deadly as the Frost King's power grew. Are you sure about this? Her voice barely carried over the wind. She looked more human than I'd ever seen her, fear and hope warring in her expression. Once we begin, there's no turning back. If we fail, we won't. I activated the device, watching the indicators spin to life. Steam met ice in carefully controlled spirals. The crystal in my pocket pulsed in harmony with the shrine's larger one. Do you trust me? More than I've trusted anyone in centuries. She took my hands, and for the first time, her touch didn't burn with cold. The ritual began simply, her power flowing into the crystal, my device channeling it, transforming it from destructive cold to balanced energy. But as the Frost King felt his prison changing, he fought back with all his ancient fury. Ice spears erupted from the ground. The wind turned solid, sharp enough to cut. The very air crystallized, threatening to freeze us where we stood. Through it all, she stood firm, one hand on the crystal, the other gripped in mine. Our hearts beat in time with the pulsing lights, creating a rhythm older than winter itself. "Hold on," I shouted, as the device reached critical levels. Steam and ice met in impossible patterns, neither winning, both transforming. Just a little longer. The cold became unbearable, then transcendent. I felt her power course through me, no longer burning but singing in my blood. My warmth flowed into her, not weakening but growing stronger in the sharing. Science and magic, mortal and spirit, love and duty, all merging into something entirely new. The crystal's light changed from cold blue to warm gold. The Frost King screamed in rage, then wonder, as his prison transformed. No longer a cage of sacrifice, but a lens of balance, focusing and dispersing winter's power in eternal harmony. The storm above calmed, snow falling now in gentle swirls that caught the dawn's first light. When it was over, she stood solid and real in my arms, her skin still cool but no longer deathly cold. "How do you feel?" I asked, brushing snowflakes from her hair, snowflakes that no longer froze instantly at her touch. "Human," she whispered, "but also more, both mortal and spirit, winter and spring." She touched my face, and her fingers left only the faintest trace of frost. "What about you?" I smiled, watching my breath mist in the air. A little cooler, but in a good way. The village celebrated for 3 days when they learned their protector had found both love and balance. The storms still come. Winter will always have its fury. But now they're natural, clean, part of the eternal cycle rather than an ancient being's rage. She has a mortal name now, though I keep it close to my heart. To the village, she's still their snow maiden, blessing their crops with gentle frost and calming winter's worst moods. To me, she's simply my love, cool fingers intertwined with mine as we walk the boundary between worlds. Our home sits at the edge of the village, half workshop and half shrine. The devices we create together combine science and magic in ways neither of us could have imagined alone. Steam and ice dance in eternal balance, just as we do. And on the coldest nights, when we watch the aurora dance above the peaks, I remember that some loves are worth braving the storm for. They say opposites attract, but maybe they do more than that. Maybe they complete one another, creating something entirely new in the space between extremes. In the end, that's where we found our answer. Not in conquering the cold or surrendering to it, but in learning to dance with winter itself. And in our dance, we found forever. My brush trembled against the canvas as twilight crept through my studio windows, bringing with it the scent of salt air and wild roses that climbed the weathered walls. My fingers, stained with ultramarine and silver, worked to capture the face that haunted my dreams, a face I knew better than my own, though I'd never seen it in waking life. Until today. The wooden floorboards of my centuries-old studio still held the day's warmth beneath my bare feet. Scattered around me, dozens of canvases caught the dying light, each one showing variations of the same mysterious features. Eyes that held the depth of ocean trenches, a jaw carved by time itself, and lips that seemed to hide ancient secrets. Some paintings were small enough to hold in one hand, others towered over me, but all bore the same ethereal quality that had earned me both fame and whispers of otherworldliness in the small coastal town of Haven Cove. The morning everything changed had dawned heavy with fog, thick enough to muffle the eternal song of waves against the shore. The air tasted of brine and possibilities as I made my way down the worn wooden steps to the beach, my usual array of supplies bundled in my arms. The damp sand squeaked beneath my feet, leaving perfect impressions that filled slowly with seawater, each one a tiny mirror reflecting the pearl gray sky. Then I saw him. He stood at the water's edge where the sea met the shore, his dark coat rippling in the salt breeze like raven's wings. As if pulled by an invisible thread, he turned, and my world tilted on its axis. Every brushstroke, every dream, every countless hour I'd spent attempting to capture his likeness paled before the reality of him. "The paintings don't do you justice," were his first words to me, his voice carrying notes of distant shores and ancient songs. "Though you've captured my soul perfectly, Ailey." My name on his lips sent shivers across my skin like the first touch of winter frost. "How do you know my name?" The words emerged as barely more than a whisper, nearly lost in the sound of breaking waves. He moved toward me with fluid grace, and I noticed that his feet left no impressions in the wet sand. The fog swirled around him like a living thing, creating halos in the weak morning light. "I know everything about you," he said, close enough now that I could see the constellation of freckles across his cheeks, exactly as I had painted them countless times. "My name is Nader, and I've crossed oceans of time to find you." The truth spilled from him like water from a broken dam. He spoke of an ancient curse laid upon him by a goddess whose love he had spurned, not out of cruelty, but because his heart recognized even then that it belonged to another soul not yet born. The goddess, in her fury, had bound him to an eternal search, He had 30 days to find his true love and convince her to bind her soul to his, or he would fade from existence. "How many times have you searched?" I asked, my artist's eye noting how the rising sun transformed his dark hair into a crown of living flame. "This is my last chance," he admitted, his eyes holding shadows deeper than the ocean itself. "The curse allows 3 attempts across all of time. I've failed twice before, unwilling to bind another soul to this fate unless I was certain." His hand reached for mine but stopped just short of touching. "But I've never found you before. Never felt this certainty." Despite the impossible nature of his tale, something deep within my soul recognized its truth. I had always felt out of step with time itself, as if I had been born in the wrong century. My art had been my only anchor, and now I understood why. I had been painting him, waiting for him, my whole life. The days that followed unfolded like pages in a fairy tale, but filled with sensory delights that proved their reality. Nader taught me to read the secret language of stars, his fingers tracing constellations against my palm as we lay in the cool sand. He showed me how to listen to the wind's ancient stories, how to feel the earth's heartbeat beneath my feet, and how to see the magic that threaded through everyday life like gold through common rock. In my studio, he posed for me as I painted, our conversations flowing like the tide, sometimes deep and philosophical, sometimes playful as summer rain. He told me of the worlds he had seen, the lives he had lived, while I shared my dreams, my fears, and the loneliness that had always lingered beneath my skin like a shadow. We danced on the beach at midnight, our bare feet moving through the foam as bioluminescent waves created trails of living light around us. His touch left trails of warmth on my skin that lingered like sunlight, and when he kissed me for the first time, I tasted salt and starlight and centuries of longing. But time, as always, moved relentlessly forward. I watched the moon wane in the sky, counting down the days with increasing desperation. I noticed how Nader's form began to waver at the edges when he thought I wasn't looking, how he sometimes seemed to fade like a watercolor left in the rain. During storms, which grew more frequent as the deadline approached, I could almost see through him when lightning flashed. On the 29th night, as thunder shook the foundations of my studio, I finally asked the question that had been burning in my throat. What exactly does it mean to bind my soul to yours? What would I become? Lightning illuminated the room, highlighting Nader's increasingly transparent form. "You would share my immortality," he explained, his voice carrying over the storm's fury. "We would become guardians of love itself, bound to help others find their destined partners until the last star burns out. We would have eternity together, but never a true home, never a moment of complete rest. And if I refuse?" The pain in his eyes cut deeper than any blade. "Then I become less than a memory, a story untold, a song unsung. Even your paintings of me would fade to a blank canvas, as if I had never existed at all." That night, sleep eluded me. I walked the beach until dawn, the warm summer air heavy against my skin. I watched the stars wheel overhead, thinking of all the paintings I had created of his face before I knew him. Had my soul been reaching across time itself, recognizing its other half? Was love still love if fate had decreed it? But then again, wasn't all love a kind of fate? The final night arrived with a sky so clear it hurt to look at, each star burning with the intensity of truth. The full moon hung low and heavy over the water, turning the ocean to liquid silver. Nader waited for me at our usual spot, his form now so transparent that I could see the waves through his body. The sand was cool beneath my feet as I approached him, small crystals of quartz catching the moonlight like scattered diamonds. The air hummed with possibility and power, and I felt destiny holding its breath. "Before you speak," Nader said, his voice carrying the weight of uncertainty. Know that these past weeks have been worth every moment of searching. Loving you, Ailey, has been worth every second of the centuries I've walked this earth. I looked at him then, really looked, seeing every dream that had ever woken me in the night, every unexplained yearning that had led my brush across countless canvases. I thought of the life I had planned, quiet days in my studio, simple pleasures, the comfort of routine. Then I thought of the life he offered, adventure, magic, purpose, and a love that had moved through time to find me. When I made my choice, it felt like the final piece of a puzzle sliding into place. I stepped forward, pressing my palm against Nader's chest where his heart beat in time with the waves. My soul has been yours since before time knew our names, I whispered. I choose you. I choose us. I choose eternity. The moon pulsed overhead like a living heart as our lips met. Magic surged through my body like electricity through water, transforming my cells one by one until I glowed with the same inner light as Nader. I felt my consciousness expand, stretching to encompass centuries instead of decades, gathering wisdom and power like a river gathering tributaries. When we parted, the world had transformed through my new eyes. I could see the golden threads of fate that connected all living things. I felt the turn of the earth beneath my feet. I heard the music of the spheres that kept the planets dancing in their orbits. Nader's smile was radiant as he took my hand, both of us now shimmering with the same otherworldly light. Where our fingers intertwined, sparks of silver and gold danced in the air. "Ready to begin forever?" he asked, as the first light of dawn painted the horizon in shades of rose and pearl. I squeezed his hand, feeling the infinity of possibilities stretching out before us like an endless ocean. Ready? Together we walked toward the rising sun, leaving behind footprints that glowed with starlight before being claimed by the eternal tide. Above us, the moon lingered in the morning sky, a silent witness to a promise fulfilled, a curse transformed into a blessing, and a love story that would echo through the ages. In my studio, the paintings remained, now infused with a subtle magic that would call to other souls searching for their destiny across the vast ocean of time. And sometimes, on nights when the moon is full and the air tastes of magic, visitors to Haven Cove swear they can see two figures dancing on the waves, their forms wreathed in starlight, their love a beacon guiding other lost souls home. Candlelight danced across the marble floors of London's most prestigious ballroom, casting golden shadows that matched the shimmering champagne in crystal flutes. I stood at the edge of the crowd, my silk gown rustling softly with each breath, watching the swirl of couples moving to the gentle strains of a waltz. The air was thick with the scent of roses and orange blossoms, brought in by the cartload to decorate the Hartley's annual spring ball. Mother had outdone herself with my presentation this season. The pale blue silk of my gown caught the light perfectly, its silver embroidery glinting like frost on morning flowers. My dark curls were arranged in the latest fashion, with tiny diamond pins that sparkled like stars against the deep brown waves. At 18, I was considered the crown jewel of this year's debutantes, though the thought brought me little joy. I knew what it meant, an endless parade of suitors, each more concerned with my dowry than my heart. The season had already brought forth a dozen proposals, each more calculated than the last. Lord Pembroke with his aging estate and mountain of debt. The young Duke of Ashworth, barely 16 and pushed forward by his ambitious mother. Even my childhood friend Thomas had tried his hand, though we both knew there was no spark between us. "You look utterly bored, my lady." The voice carried the hint of a smile, rich and warm like honey. I turned to find myself staring into the most remarkable pair of green eyes I'd ever seen. Nicholas Owensby stood before me, the notorious charmer of London society. His dark hair fell in perfect waves, and his evening clothes were immaculate. A perfectly tailored black coat that emphasized his broad shoulders, a a crisp white cravat, and a subtle gold pin that winked in the candlelight. But it was his smile that caught and held my attention, crooked and genuine, nothing like the practiced simpers of other gentlemen. "I assure you, sir, I am perfectly entertained by my own thoughts," I replied, lifting my chin slightly. His reputation preceded him, a different lady on his arm at every ball, a trail of broken hearts in his wake. Just last week, I'd overheard Lady Winterbourne warning her daughter away from his dangerous charms. He laughed, the sound rich and unexpected. Lady Caroline Bentley, defending the excitement of standing alone in a corner. I must hear these fascinating thoughts of yours. The orchestra began a new piece, Mozart, one of my favorites, and he extended his hand. "Dance with me?" I hesitated, but something in his eyes made me place my gloved hand in his. As he led me onto the floor, I felt the eyes of the entire room upon us. The music began, and we moved together as if we'd danced 1,000 times before. His hand at my waist was steady and sure, his touch sending warmth spreading through my entire body. "Your thoughts, my lady," he prompted, guiding me through a turn with effortless grace. "I was thinking how tedious it is to be paraded about like a prize mare at auction," I admitted, surprising myself with my honesty. Each potential buyer examining my teeth and checking my pedigree. His eyes widened slightly, then crinkled at the corners. Refreshingly direct. And here I thought you were the perfect society miss. Perfect is rather dull, don't you think? The dance continued, but something had shifted. Our conversation flowed effortlessly, ranging from books to art to travel. He was surprisingly well-read, challenging my opinions on Byron with clever observations that made me laugh despite myself. When he spoke of his travels in Italy, his eyes lit up with genuine passion that made my heart flutter. "You should see Venice in the moonlight," he said, his voice dropping low. "The canals turn to ribbons of silver, and the whole city feels like a dream." "You make it sound magical," I whispered, lost in the picture he painted. "Everything can be magical if you look at it the right way." His hand tightened slightly on my waist, and I realized how close we'd drawn together, closer than propriety strictly allowed. When the music ended, I found I didn't want to let go of his hand. He seemed equally reluctant to release me, his fingers lingering against mine as he bowed. That night marked the beginning of what seemed like a dream. At every social gathering, Nicholas sought me out. We would find quiet corners to discuss everything and nothing, our conversations punctuated by lingering looks and brief touches that set my heart racing. He showed me a London I'd never known, secret gardens hidden between townhouses, tiny bookshops with treasures in their dusty corners, and quiet moments that belonged only to us. One afternoon, he took me to a hidden courtyard garden he'd discovered. Roses climbed the ancient walls, their pink and white blooms nodding in the gentle breeze. We sat on a stone bench, reading poetry together, his shoulder pressed warm against mine. "She walks in beauty, like the night," he quoted softly. But his eyes weren't on the book. They were on me, intense and full of something that made my breath catch. "Of cloudless climes and starry skies," I finished, my voice barely a whisper. His hand found mine, his thumb tracing circles on my palm through my thin glove. The touch sent shivers up my arm, and I knew I was falling deeply, irrevocably in love with him. I knew what people whispered behind their fans, that I was just another conquest for the notorious Mr. Owensby. But when he looked at me, I saw something different in his eyes, something real, something that made me believe in magic and true love and all the things I'd dismissed as girlish fantasies. Until the night of the Hartley's summer ball. I had arrived late, having spent too long choosing the perfect gown, deep emerald silk that made my eyes sparkle and my skin glow like moonlight. The ballroom was crowded, and I searched for Nicholas among the dancers. When I didn't see him, I made my way to the terrace for air. That's when I heard her laugh, musical and intimate, followed by his unmistakable voice. I turned the corner to find Nicholas pressed close to Lady Penelope Howard, his hand cupping her cheek as she gazed up at him adoringly. Her golden hair gleamed in the moonlight, and her beauty made my heart sink. "You know you're the only one who truly understands me," he murmured, and my world shattered. I fled before either could see me, but the image was burned into my mind. How foolish I'd been to think I was different, special. I was just another in his long line of conquests, another notch in his belt of broken hearts. The next morning, I convinced my parents to let me retire to our country estate in Derbyshire. I claimed the London air disagreed with me, that I needed rest. In truth, I needed to escape the whispers, the pitying looks, and most of all, the chance of seeing Nicholas again. The countryside welcomed me with open arms. Spring was in full bloom, painting the rolling hills in vibrant greens and soft purples. I threw myself into managing the estate, learning everything I could from our steward. The physical work in the gardens helped ease the ache in my heart, and slowly, I began to feel like myself again. I spent my days in the rose garden my mother had planted years ago, pruning and tending the delicate blooms. Something was healing in nurturing beauty, in watching life unfold according to its own gentle rhythm. The roses didn't care about society's expectations or broken hearts. They simply grew, bloomed, and shared their beauty with the world. But peace was not to be mine for long. One misty morning, as I walked through the rose garden, I heard hoofbeats on the gravel drive. My heart stopped when I saw Nicholas dismounting, looking travel-worn but determined. His clothes were dusty from the road, his cravat slightly askew, so different from his usual immaculate appearance. He carried something small in his hand that caught the early morning light. "Caroline," he called out, his voice carrying across the garden. "Please, let me explain." I turned to leave, but his next words froze me in place. "What you saw that night, it wasn't what you think." Lady Penelope was distraught over her brother's illness. I was comforting an old friend, nothing more. I've been a fool in many ways, but never about my feelings for you. I faced him slowly, steeling myself against the sight of him. But what I saw made me pause. Gone was the polished dandy of London society. This Nicholas looked raw and vulnerable, his eyes shadowed with lack of sleep. There was an earnestness in his expression I'd never seen before. "Why are you here?" I asked, proud that my voice remained steady. He opened his hand, revealing an ancient ring. The gold was worn smooth with age, set with a stone that seemed to hold starlight within its depths. As the morning light touched it, colors swirled in its heart like the northern lights I'd read about in books. "This belonged to my grandmother," he said softly. "There's a story in my family about it, that it was blessed by a wise woman centuries ago, enchanted to reveal true love. It shows the bearer's heart's desire, but only if that love is pure and unselfish." As he spoke, the stone began to glow with a soft, warm light. Inside its depths, I saw images forming. Nicholas and me in the bookshop, laughing over Byron. The two of us walking in the secret garden, his jacket around my shoulders against the evening chill. Every genuine moment we'd shared. But I also saw moments I hadn't witnessed. Nicholas pacing his study late at night, writing and discarding letter after letter to me. Him questioning his past choices, realizing how empty his life had been before we met. "I've changed, Caroline," he continued, taking a step closer. His familiar scent, sandalwood and leather, wrapped around me, bringing back a flood of memories. The The man I was before, the one who flirted and played at love, he died the moment I met you. You showed me what real connection means, what it is to truly see someone and be seen in return. The ring pulsed brighter, and I felt a warmth spread through me, like sunshine after rain. Magic tingled in the air around us, ancient and powerful. The roses seemed to lean closer, their perfume intensifying as if nature itself held its breath to witness this moment. I don't expect you to forgive me immediately, Nicholas continued, reaching for my hand but stopping just short of touching me. But I'm asking for a chance to prove myself, to show you the man I've become, the man you helped me become. The morning mist swirled around us, touched with golden light. In that moment, I felt something shift in the air, as if fate itself held its breath. The magic of the ring seemed to hum, a melody that matched the beating of my heart. How do I know this isn't just another pretty speech? I whispered, even as something deep within me recognized the truth in his words. He held out the ring. See for yourself. With trembling fingers, I took it. The moment it touched my skin, the world around us changed. The garden blurred, and I saw visions in the stone. Nicholas spending weeks researching his family history to find the ring. His sleepless nights after I left London. The truth of that evening with Lady Penelope. I saw him comforting her as she wept over her brother's worsening condition. Saw how he thought of me even in that moment, wishing he could share his own experiences of losing a sibling young. But more than that, I saw his heart laid bare before me. The love there was real, profound, and transformative. I saw how meeting me had awakened something in him he'd never known was sleeping. A desire for depth, for meaning, for a love that could last beyond a single dance or stolen kiss. The visions faded, leaving us standing in the misty garden, changed by what we'd seen. Nicholas reached for my hand again, and this time I let him take it. His touch was gentle and reverent, as if he held something infinitely precious. I love you, Caroline Bentley, he said, his voice rough with emotion. Not for your beauty or your status, but for your brilliant mind, your kind heart, and the way you challenge me to be better. I love you for the person you are when no one else is watching. The woman who reads Byron in the garden and dreams of more than society's expectations. Tears blurred my vision as I looked up at him. The morning sun broke through the mist, surrounding us in a golden glow. The ring warmed in my palm, its magic pulsing like a heartbeat. I love you too, I whispered, the words carrying the weight of truth. The real you, not the mask you wore in London. He pulled me close, one hand cupping my face as the other wrapped around my waist. When our lips met, the ring's magic surged around us. Golden light spiraled upward, surrounding us in a shower of sparks that felt like falling stars. The roses burst into sudden bloom, their petals opening to release waves of heavenly fragrance. At that moment, I understood what the old legend meant. True love wasn't just about passion or romance, but about seeing and accepting someone completely, flaws and all. Nicholas slipped the ring onto my finger, where it fit perfectly as if it had been waiting for this moment throughout the centuries. The stone settled into a gentle glow, a constant reminder of the magic that had brought us together, and the love that would keep us that way. Tell me more about Venice, I said softly, leaning into his embrace. His smile was radiant as he held me close. I'll do better than that. I'll take you there. We'll watch the moonlight on the canals together, and I'll show you all the magic I promised. As we walked through the garden together, planning our future, I realized that sometimes the greatest magic isn't in enchanted rings or ancient legends, but in the simple courage it takes to open your heart and trust again. Nicholas had proven that love, when real and true, has the power to transform not just the heart, but the very soul. And so began our new chapter, written not in the glittering ballrooms of London, but in the quiet moments we shared, in the gentle magic of everyday love, and in the promise of a future filled with all the adventures we would face together. The ring on my finger glowed softly, a reminder that some promises, once made with a pure heart, become the most powerful magic of all. In the years that followed, we often returned to that rose garden where we found our way back to one another. Each visit, the roses seemed to bloom a little brighter, their perfume a little sweeter, as if blessed by the magic of that morning. And though we traveled the world together, seeing all the wonders Nicholas had promised, we always knew that the greatest magic was the love we shared. A love that, like the enchanted ring, would shine brighter with each passing year. The scent of roses filled our bedroom the night I first felt Brendan's presence. Fresh roses, though none bloomed in our garden that bitter November. Their fragrance mingled with his familiar sandalwood cologne, the expensive one I'd given him for our last anniversary, the bottle still half full on his dresser. My heart lurched against my ribs as warmth enveloped me, as tangible as his embraces had always been. Brendan. The name escaped my lips like a prayer, barely disturbing the stillness of the room. The roses grew stronger, and with them came a whisper of wind through the perfectly still air, carrying the ghost of his laughter. 3 weeks had passed since the accident that shattered my world. 21 days of waking up reaching for him, of coffee growing cold because I couldn't bear to drink it alone, of silence where his voice should have been. The police report was crisp and clinical. Head-on collision, drunk driver, instant death. As if the love of my life could be reduced to a few stark sentences on white paper. I'd been folding his clothes. Finally, after weeks of leaving them exactly where he'd dropped them that last morning. His blue cardigan lay across my lap, the one with the wooden buttons I'd sewn back on countless times. He'd worn it the day we met, spilling coffee on himself as he hurried into the art gallery where I worked. I'd helped him clean up, and he'd asked me to dinner right there, coffee still dripping from his sleeve. The warmth intensified, wrapping around me like an embrace. Impossible tears pricked my eyes. I thought I'd cried them all away at the funeral. "I miss you," I whispered into the empty room. "I miss you so much it hurts to breathe." The melody drifted up from downstairs, so faint I almost missed it. Our song, "Can't Help Falling in Love," playing from the grand piano Brendan had insisted on buying for our first anniversary. "Every home needs music," he'd said, those green eyes of his dancing with joy as the movers positioned it in our living room. He'd played it almost every evening, filling our home with everything from classical pieces to pop songs, his long fingers dancing across the keys while I painted in my studio nearby. My feet carried me down the stairs before I could think better of it. The piano sat untouched, gathering dust, yet the music grew stronger with each step. As I reached the bottom, a single key pressed itself, striking a clear, resonant note that hung in the air between worlds. "This isn't happening," I murmured, pressing my palms against my temples. But even as denial formed on my lips, I felt it, the distinctive brush of fingers through my hair, exactly as Brendan used to do when he passed behind me. Quiana. My name, breathed in his voice, soft as a summer breeze and rich with love. I spun around, searching for something, anything. The room remained empty, but the air felt thick with possibility. That was the beginning. The signs multiplied as days passed. Coffee brewed itself every morning at exactly 7, just as Brendan had always said it. The scent of paint and turpentine wafted from my abandoned studio, where my easel stood waiting with a blank canvas. Lights flickered in patterns too precise to be accidental, spelling out "love you" in Morse code, a game we'd played during long-distance phone calls early in our relationship. My sister Geraldine's concern grew with each story I shared. "You need help, Q," she insisted over lunch, worry etching lines around her eyes. This isn't healthy. Brendan wouldn't want you living in denial. But how could I explain that these moments weren't denial? They were the only thing keeping me whole. That feeling Brendan's presence, however impossible, made breathing possible again. Maeve found me on a rain-soaked evening, when the veil between worlds felt particularly thin. She appeared on my doorstep like something from a fairy tale, her silver hair caught up in an artfully messy bun, wearing a dress that seemed to shift colors in the porch light. "Your husband is quite the romantic," she said by way of greeting, her Irish lilt warm with amusement. "He's been leading me here for days, leaving trails of light like breadcrumbs. May I come in?" I should have closed the door. Instead, I stepped aside. Maeve moved through our home with purpose, pausing at spots where memories hung heaviest. The kitchen where Brendan and I had slow danced at midnight. The window seat where we'd planned our future. The wall where our wedding photos caught the last light of day. "Your love story has created quite a stir on the other side," she explained, settling into Brendan's favorite armchair. "It's rare to find a connection strong enough to pierce the veil. Rarer still to find one that holds after death. You can see him." Hope bloomed painfully in my chest. Her smile held centuries of understanding. "He never left, love. He's here now, standing behind you, his hand on your shoulder. He says to remind you about the fireflies." My breath caught. Our first kiss had been on a summer night, surrounded by their dancing light. We'd joked that they were nature's fairy lights, celebrating with us. Later, he'd proposed in the same spot, fireflies creating a natural constellation around us. "He's caught between worlds," Maeve continued, her expression growing serious. "Your grief, your love, they're anchoring him here. But it's dangerous for a soul to linger too long in this space. The pain," she hesitated, "it could consume him entirely." "What can I do?" I asked, desperate to protect him even now. "Learn to live again," she said simply. "He's trying to show you how." That night, I dreamed of Brendan with startling clarity. We stood in my art studio, morning light streaming through the windows. He looked exactly as I remembered, dark curls falling over his forehead, green eyes bright with the mischief I'd fallen in love with. "You stopped painting," he said, running his fingers over my dusty brushes. "I stopped breathing when you died." His smile held a universe of tenderness. "That's not what I asked you to do." "You didn't ask for anything. You left." The words tasted of grief and anger. "Did I?" He moved closer, and I could feel the familiar electricity of his presence. "Look around, love. Really look." The studio had transformed. My old paintings hung on the walls, but they were different, infused with an otherworldly light that seemed to pulse with life. New canvases leaned against the walls, blank but promising. Everything was clean, organized, ready. "You did this?" I had help. His laugh filled the room like sunshine. "It's amazing what a spirit can accomplish with enough motivation, but you have to do the rest." He reached for me, his touch cool but solid. "I have loved you all of my life, Kiana. Death did not change that." I woke with tears on my cheeks and paint beneath my fingernails. The days that followed took on a dreamlike quality. I began painting again, my work flowing from my brushes with an intensity I'd never known before. Colors seemed more vivid, emotions more acute. Each canvas captured moments between worlds, the space where love transcended death. Brendan's presence grew stronger. Sometimes I caught glimpses of him in mirrors or windows. A flash of his smile, the outline of his shape. The house came alive with signs of his love. Fresh flowers appearing in unexpected places, my favorite songs playing softly in empty rooms, the feeling of his arms around me when I cried. But Maeve's warnings echoed. Each manifestation seemed to cost him more energy. The temperature would plummet, lights would strain and dim, and sometimes I heard him gasp with effort. One night, I found him in our bedroom, his form more solid than I'd ever seen it. He stood by the window, bathed in moonlight, looking almost alive. Our song began to play, soft and clear. "Dance with me?" He held out his hand, and this time, when I took it, his touch felt almost warm. I stepped into his arms without hesitation. He felt real, solid, though his skin held the coolness of autumn air. We swayed together, and for a moment, time ceased to exist. "I have to go," he whispered into my hair. "I know." The words felt like broken glass. "Maeve said you're in pain." "Only when you are." His fingers traced my cheek. "You're starting to live again. I see it in your paintings, in your smile. That's all I ever wanted." "How can I let you go?" I pressed closer, trying to memorize the feeling of him. "You don't have to. I'll always be part of you, Kiana. But you have to let me love you differently now." We danced until dawn, painted the sky in whispered pinks and golds. With the first ray of sunlight, Brendan began to fade. "Promise me something," he said, his voice growing distant. "Promise you'll keep painting our love story." "I promise." I reached for him, but my hands passed through air. "I love you." "Forever," he whispered, and then he was gone. 5 years have passed since that morning. My paintings hang in galleries now, each one a window into the space between love and loss, life and death. People often ask what inspires the ethereal light that seems to glow from within each canvas. I tell them it's about love that transcends boundaries. Tonight, as I work on a new piece in my studio, a familiar warmth fills the room. A single firefly drifts through the air, its light pulsing with impossible brightness. It lands on my easel, illuminating the canvas where I'm painting our last dance. I don't need to see Brendan to know he's here, watching over me, loving me in his new way. Some loves, I've learned, are strong enough to transform rather than end. They become the light that guides us home, the warmth that keeps us going, the magic that turns grief into grace. The firefly rises, dancing through the air like a star come down to earth. Its light reminds me of the truth Brendan taught me. Love doesn't die. It simply learns to speak in whispers, in memories, in the quiet moments between heartbeats. And sometimes, if we're very lucky, it learns to shine like fireflies in the dark, guiding us home to the love that never truly leaves us.